In the 23rd chapter, titled The Believers, from the 12th to the 14th verses, God is said to give a detailed description of how the human being is formed. It begins by saying, "We then placed him as a sperm drop in a place of settlement, firmly fixed. Then we made the drop into a alaqa." We will translate this word very soon. "And then we changed the alaqa into a lump. Then we made out of that lump into bones. And then we clothed the bones with flesh. Then we caused him to grow and come into being and attain the definitive human form." In the 21st century, we can now safely say that this verse is clearly describing the process of human development in correct chronological order. However, what we should be paying attention to in particular is the second stage, referring to the development of the embryo. The specific word used to describe the embryo in this verse is the word alaqa. The word alaqa, when translated into English, can mean three separate things. Firstly, a blood clot, or to be suspended, that is to be hanging or clinging to something, or thirdly and finally, a leech. Now, all three definitions don't come anywhere near what we perceive to be the human embryo. So, why are these words used and what significance do they share with the human embryo? Can the embryo be described as a blood clot? Well, what do you think? In the 3rd week of embryonic development, a tubular heart joins with the blood vessels to form a primordial cardiovascular system, and by the end of the 3rd week, the blood is circulating and the heart begins to beat on day 21. The first thing that comes to mind in regards to being suspended or hanging is the umbilical cord. But we can't use that example because we are simply referring to step 2, before the baby has even formed. But we now know today that the umbilical cord is formed from the connecting stalk. And the connecting stalk is formed as soon as the embryo is formed. The embryo's connecting stalk has even been described by John Allen and Beverly Kramer as an object to suspend the developing embryo in the extra-embryonic column. So an embryo is suspended and does have a strong resemblance with a blood clot. What on earth would an embryo have to do with a leech? Figure A shows the structure of an embryo at 25 days. Figure B shows a leech. Now please note once again that the embryo in this stage is no greater than the size of a kernel of wheat. This is an X-ray of the embryo at 22 days. This is the internal structure of a leech. It's mind-blowing stuff, but you still haven't seen anything yet. This is the head of the embryo at 22 days. The detail you are seeing right now is absolutely impossible to be seen with the human eye and can only be seen with a microscope. This is the back end of a leech. There's no other words used to describe this other than mind-blowing. The pictures we have shown you are impossible to be seen with the human eye or even to be predicted by the human mind. Once again, the verses we have shown you were revealed over 1400 years ago to a man who couldn't read nor write. Are these the words of God?
Descriptions of the human embryo in the Quran cannot be based on scientific knowledge in the 7th century. The only reasonable conclusion is that these descriptions were revealed to Muhammad from God, from God, from God, from God, from God, from God.
A very important feature of mountains is indicated in a Quranic verse: the function of preventing shocks in the earth. We placed firmly embedded mountains on the earth so it would not move under them. And geology today confirms this characteristic of mountains. Formerly, it was thought that mountains were merely protrusions rising above the surface of the earth. However, in the 20th century, scientists realized that this was not actually the case. Those parts, known as mountain root, extended down as far as 10 to 15 times their own height. For example, Mount Everest, the summit of which stands approximately 9 kilometers above the surface of the earth, has a root deeper than 125 kilometers. Mountains emerge as a result of the movements and collisions of massive plates forming the Earth's crust. When two plates collide, the stronger one slides under the other. The one on the top bends and forms heights and mountains. The layer beneath proceeds under the ground and makes a deep extension downwards. These extensions are the mountain roots. Thanks to their roots, mountains fix the Earth's crust. Therefore, they prevent any sliding over the magma layer or amongst the layers themselves, and also prevent major earth tremors. With these features, mountains can be compared to nails holding strips of wood together. God tells us in the Quran, "Haven't we made the earth as a bed, and the mountains its pegs?" The fact that this function was revealed in the Quran at a time when it was unknown to anyone is another of this divine book's great miracles. Were it not for the fixing effect of the mountains, soil would not collect on the earth's surface, water would not accumulate in the soil, no plants could grow. In short, life on earth would be impossible. Through the mercy of God, however, the earth is capable of sustaining life.
The Quran is not a book of science but a book of science, yet it contains some undeniable facts related to science. It wasn't until recently that pain receptors in the skin were discovered. Without these pain receptors, a person would not be able to feel pain. Allah mentioned this in the Quran over 1400 years ago. Allah said, "Indeed those who disbelieve in our verses, we will drive them into a fire. Every time their skins are roasted through, we will replace them with other skins so they may taste the punishment. Indeed Allah is ever exalted in might and wise." The verse clearly points out that pain is dependent upon the skin, and Allah will replace the skin so that those who disbelieve will feel the pain over and over again. Pain and temperature. Your skin receptors don't only respond to touch, they also register pain as well as warmth and cold. Your pain receptors are the most numerous. Every square centimeter of your skin contains around 200 pain receptors. 15 receptors for pressure, 6 for cold and 1 for warmth. In total there are over 3 million pain receptors throughout the body, found in skin, muscle, bones, blood vessels and some organs. Now let's take a look at the different types of burns. First degree burns affect only the outer skin layer. The skin area appears dry, red and mildly swollen. First degree burns are painful and sensitive to touch, usually feel better in 1 to 2 days and often heal in about a week. Second degree burns affect the skin's outer and lower layers. The skin is painful, swollen, red and has blisters. The skin also has a weepy, watery surface. And then there's the third degree burns. People who suffer from third degree burns also referred to as full thickness burns. This often burns and destroys the entire thickness of the skin. One of the symptoms for the third degree burn is a lack of pain because nerve endings have been destroyed, so there is no pain. Because the pain receptors have been obliterated along with the rest of the dermis. Blood vessels, sweat glands, sebaceous glands and hair follicles are all destroyed in skin that suffers a full thickness burn. Now contemplate over this. Allah says He will drive the disbelievers into a fire. Every time the skins are roasted through, just like in a third degree burn, the skin becomes painless. So He will replace their skin so that they may taste the punishment over and over again.
In the field of astronomy, if you ask a scientist that how was our universe formed, how did it come into existence, so he will tell you about the Big Bang theory, that initially the whole universe was one primary nebula. Then there was a secondary separation which gave rise to galaxies, which further split to form things such as our solar system, which gave rise to planets, the sun, and the present earth which we live in. I start my talk by quoting a verse of the Holy Quran from Surah Al-Anbiya, chapter number 21, verse number 30, which says, "Avalam yaral lazina kafaru." Do not the unbelievers see, "Anna samawati wal arda kanata ratkan fafataknahuma." The heavens and the earth were joined together, and we clove them asunder. This verse of the Holy Quran speaks about the Big Bang theory in a nutshell. Imagine what we came to know today, the Holy Quran mentions 1400 years ago.
He, God, has created the heavens and the earth for truth. He wraps the night up in the day and wraps the day up in the night. Quran chapter 39 verse 5. In the Quran, the words used for describing the universe are quite remarkable. The Arabic word which is translated as to wrap in the verse is takwir. In English it means to make one thing lap over another, folded up as a garment that is laid away. For instance, in Arabic dictionaries, this word is used for the action of wrapping one thing around another, in the way that a turban or a hijab is put on. The information given in the verse about the day and the night wrapping each other up includes accurate information about the shape of the world. This can be true only if the earth is round. This means that in the Quran, which was revealed in the 7th century, the roundness of the world was hinted at. However, it should be remembered that the understanding of astronomy of the time perceived the world differently. It was then thought that the world was a flat plane, and all scientific calculations and explanations were based on this belief. However, the glorious Quran has employed the most definitive words when it came to describing the universe. These facts, which we could only correctly fathom in our century, have been in the Quran for a vast length of time.
Chapter 96, verse number 16 of the Quran talks about how lies are associated with the frontal part of the brain. In this verse, the word used is nafiya, meaning the frontal part of the head or forehead. Now I'll show you a few researches from very recent times on this issue. Here is a research that was conducted in March 2002. The research was carried out using functional magnetic resonance imaging or fMRI. It showed that increased activity in the anterior cingulate cortex, the superior frontal gyrus, and the left premotor, motor, and anterior parietal cortex was specifically associated with receptive responses. Here is another research that was carried out in September 2001. This research showed that lying was associated with longer response times and greater activity in bilateral ventrolateral prefrontal cortices. Now, to give you an illustration of where the prefrontal cortex and the anterior cingulate gyrus are located, you can clearly see from the pictures shown that both of them are located in the frontal part of the brain. Albert Einstein in 1905 proposed his special theory of relativity, where he suggested that time is in fact relative and not absolute. His theory was later on verified with the aid of experiments. The amazing thing is that Quran also talked about the relativity of time way before. Quran in chapter 22 verse 47 and also in chapter 70 verse 4 talks about how a day in one realm is different to a day in another realm.
There is a verse in the Quran which says, "And we made the sky a protected ceiling, but they from the signs are turning away." So what is it that Allah says? He has made the sky a protected ceiling. Let's take a closer look at our Earth's atmosphere. Layers of the Earth's atmosphere. Stand outside and look up. What do you see? You might see a blue sky or a woolly cloud. At night you might see stars, a satellite or a crescent moon. What you are not seeing, however, is the complexity of our atmosphere. The atmosphere is a protective layer of gases that shelter all life on Earth, keeping temperatures within a relatively small range and blocking out harmful rays of sunlight. The atmosphere is divided into 5 layers. It is thickest near the surface and thins out with height until it eventually merges with space. Number 1. The troposphere is a layer above the surface and contains half of the Earth's atmosphere. The troposphere begins at the Earth's surface and extends from 4 to 12 miles, 6 to 20 kilometers high. Weather occurs in this layer. The height of the troposphere varies from the equator to the poles. Number 2. The stratosphere. The stratosphere is a second layer. Many jet aircrafts fly in the stratosphere because it is very stable. The stratosphere extends around 31 miles, 50 kilometers, down to anywhere from 4 to 12 miles, 6 to 20 kilometers above the Earth's surface. This layer holds 19% of the atmosphere gases, but very little water vapor. Number 3. The mesosphere is the third layer. This layer extends around 31 miles, 50 kilometers above the Earth's surface, to 53 miles, 85 kilometers. Number 4. The thermosphere. Between 53 miles, 85 kilometers, and 375 miles, 600 kilometers, lies the thermosphere. It is also where space shuttles orbit. Number 5. The fifth layer is the exosphere. This atmosphere merges into space. This is the upper layer of our atmosphere. It extends from the top of the thermosphere to 6,200 miles, 10,000 kilometers above the Earth. Now let's take a closer look at the different layers of the atmosphere and how they help humans and all living things on Earth to survive. Here are just a few benefits of the Earth's atmosphere. Breathing. The inhabitants of our planet live in the troposphere. The lowest part of the atmosphere is called the troposphere. The gases in this region are predominantly molecular oxygen and molecular nitrogen. Earth's atmosphere varies in density and composition as the altitude increases above the surface. All weather is confined to this lower region, and it contains 90% of the Earth's atmosphere and 99% of the water vapor. A radiation shield. The atmosphere of Earth protects us and all living things on the Earth from dangerous radiation from the Sun. In addition to the light we see, the Sun also gives off ultraviolet radiation. Much of it is filtered out by the atmosphere. Ultraviolet radiation can destroy living cells, causing harm to our skin and leading to skin cancer. The sun's rays are important for us. They provide light and heat, but also contain dangerous rays that can harm us. The atmosphere helps to protect us. About 90% of the ozone in the Earth's atmosphere is found in the region called the stratosphere. This is the atmospheric layer between the 16 and 48 kilometers, 10 and 30 miles above the Earth's surface. Ozone forms a kind of layer in the stratosphere, where it is more concentrated than anywhere else. Ozone and oxygen molecules in the stratosphere absorb ultraviolet light from the sun, providing a shield that prevents this radiation from passing to the Earth's surface. While both oxygen and ozone together absorb 95 to 99.9% of the sun's ultraviolet radiation, only ozone effectively absorbs the most energetic ultraviolet radiation, known as a UVC and UVB. The ultraviolet light can cause biological damage, like skin cancer, tissue damage to the eye, and plant tissue damage. The protective role of the ozone layer in the upper atmosphere is so vital that life on land probably would not exist today without it. The security blanket. The atmosphere also keeps us warm. It holds the surface heat on the Earth and prevents it from radiating out into space. Without the atmosphere holding in the heat, the Earth will be a very cold place. On the Moon, where there is no atmosphere, the daytime temperature can be extremely hot, and at nighttime, temperature is extremely cold. Without the blanket of the atmosphere, we might freeze or fry. As the mesosphere extends upward above the stratosphere, temperatures decrease. The coldest part of our atmosphere are located in this layer and can reach minus 90 degrees centigrade. The gases include the oxygen molecules continue to become more dense as one descends. As such, temperature increases as one descends, rising above 5 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 15 degrees centigrade, near the bottom of this layer. The gases in the mesosphere are now thick enough to slow down meteors, hurtling into the atmosphere where they burn up. A meteoroid is a solid body in interplanetary space before it reaches the Earth's atmosphere. Meteors are caused by the entry of small pieces of rock, dust, or metal from space into the atmosphere at extremely high speeds. They can travel at this rate very easily in a vacuum of space because there's nothing to stop them. Earth's atmosphere, on the other hand, is full of matter, which creates a great deal of friction on the travelling objects. This friction generates enough heat to 3000 degrees Fahrenheit or 1649 degrees centigrade to raise the meteoroid's surface to its boiling point. So this meteoroid is vaporized layer by layer. A meteor denotes the fiery streak or shooting star, which appears when a tiny meteoroid strikes the Earth's atmosphere and burns up. Most meteors result from meteoroids no more than a few centimeters. Up to 25 million meteors arrive each day. Scientists estimate that anywhere between 44 and 100 tons of meteoric material fall on the Earth each day after it burns up in the mesosphere. Imagine the Earth being pelted with up to 25 million meteors each day without the protection of the mesosphere. Now please take a few moments to think, reflect and contemplate. As you can see, the atmosphere plays a crucial role in protecting humans and all living things on Earth. And the Quran pointed to the sky's protection as a sign of God over 1400 years ago, in a time when all this was unknown to the people and which has only been discovered recently. And that is why God says in the Quran, "Verily, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and in the alternation of night and day, there are indeed signs for men of understanding." Now, is this not a clear sign for the person of understanding to reflect upon?
In the field of hydrology, we learn about the water cycle in the school. The water cycle, what we learn in the school, was first described in 1580 by Sir Bernard Palissy. And we learned in school that the water evaporates from the ocean, it forms into clouds, the clouds move, they rise, they condense, and the water falls and flows back into the ocean, and the water cycle is completed. Previously, in 7th century BC,
Thales of Miletus, he said, it was the spray of the ocean which was picked up by the winds which fell into the interior as rain. People did not know how did the rain fall. So in 7th century, Thales of Miletus, he said, it was the spray of the ocean which was picked up by the winds and fell into the interior as rain. People did not know from where did the underground water come. And people believed, even at the time of Plato, that when the water fell, this water flowed by a secret passage into the ocean called as Tartarus. People did not know from where did the underground water come. So they thought it was the pressure of the winds on the water which forced the water into the interior. And even till as late as 17th century, people and great thinkers like Descartes believed in this theory. Even in 19th century, people believed in the Aristotle's theory that the water evaporated from the earth and cooled in mountain caverns which fed the springs. Today we know that the underground water is due to the seepage of the rainwater. And Allah says in the Quran, in Surah Zumar, chapter number 39, verse number 21, seest not thou that it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who sends down water from the sky and causes it to soak in the grounds, causes springs in the ground, and then causes sown field of various colors to grow. Quran mentions in Surah Rum, chapter number 30, verse number 24. It is Allah who sends down water from the sky and then gives life to the earth after it is dead. The Quran says in Surah Mu'minun, chapter number 23, verse number 18, it is we who send down water from the sky, and we can store it, and we can even drain it easily. The Quran says in Surah Hijr, chapter number 15, verse number 22, that we cause fecundating winds. The Arabic word used is lawaki, which is the plural of lakaha, coming from laki, which means to fecundate, which means to impregnate. We cause fecundating winds. We cause winds to impregnate, and then the water falls from the sky. And today we know that science tells us that the pollen is picked up by the winds and it impregnates the clouds. And the second type is the clouds, they join together. Then there's lightning and water falls from the sky. A similar message of hydrology and water cycle is mentioned in Surah Nur, chapter number 24, verse number 43. It is Allah who makes the clouds to move gently and then causes them to join, then makes them into a heap, and then water emerges from the sky. Quran says in Surah Rum, chapter number 30, verse number 48, that it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who makes the clouds to rise, then makes it into fragments, and then water falls from the sky. The Quran speaks about the water cycle in great detail. The Quran says in Surah Tariq, chapter number 86, verse number 11, وَالسَّمَاءِ ذَاتِ الرَّجِّ, which means by the capacity of the heavens to return. Besides the sky or the heavens acting like a protected ceiling, besides reflecting all the unwanted dangerous rays back into the space, it also returns back the water evaporation. What the water evaporates from the ocean, the sky, it sends it back onto the earth. And the Quran says in Surah Nur, chapter number 24, verse number 43, that we cause water to fall from the sky, from mountains of clouds. And when we are traveling in an aeroplane wasn't there 14 years back, and when we look at the clouds below, we see it is like mountain of wolves. The clouds, they appear as mountains. Imagine, Quran mentions that 14 years ago. Quran describes the water cycle in great detail in several verses. Besides the several verses I quoted, there are many other umpteen number of verses which speak about the water cycle. It's mentioned in Surah Araf, chapter number 7, verse number 57. In Surah Rod, chapter number 13, verse number 17. In Surah Furqan, chapter number 25, verse number 40 and 49. In Surah Fatir, chapter number 35, verse number 9. In Surah Yasin, chapter number 36, verse number 34. It's mentioned in Surah Jashia, chapter number 45, verse number 5. In Surah Qaf, chapter number 50, verse number 9 and 10. It's mentioned in Surah Waqiah, chapter number 56, verse number 67 to 70. It's mentioned in Surah Mulk, chapter number 6 and verse number 30. You can go on only quoting the several verses of the Quran which speak about the water cycle. You can only give a talk on hydrology and water cycle in the Quran.